In 1996, I was asked to write a book of nonsense. In a way, it was meant to be a kind of reply to Edward Lear, and I always think that one book is always in some kind of conversation with another. So really, this is part of my conversation with Edward Lear. So this first group of poems I'm going to read comes from that book of nonsense. Rosie, Rosie. The dog told the cat told the queen. Rosie's birthday cake stuck in the washing machine. It sploshed it washed it, and Dad had a fit. Rosie's whipped it out and eaten every bit. Really? He had a little sticker and he had a little ticket, and he took the little sticker and he stuck it to the ticket. Now he hasn't got a sticker and he hasn't got a ticket. He's got a bit of both, which he calls a little sticket. Help. Help, help! Nothing's right. I can't find my ears, and my pants are too tight. There's a clock in my sock, there's a rose up my nose, there's an egg on my leg, and there's a stink in the sink. Help, help! I've had enough. I can't find my eyes, and the going's getting tough. There's bread in my bed, there's flies in my fries, there's a slug in the jug, and there's a ghost on my toast. Help, help! I'm in a mess. Have you got my head? The cat says yes. The cat says yes, the donkey says no, the hamster in the swimming pool says he doesn't know. Footling around. Footle flop doodle, you can flap your flapper, you can flop your flopper, you can clap your clapper, you can clop your clopper. Footle flop doodle, you can foot your footle, you can fit your fiddle, you can dood your doodle, you can did your diddle. Footle flop doodle, footle flop doodle. Footle flop doodle, footle flop doodle. And now some limericks. A young man with wobbly eyes used to muddle his G's and his Y's. When he said guess, I guess he meant yes, and yugs was how he said guys. There was a young man with a pimple who said everything in life is simple. For weeks and weeks he sucked in his cheeks, and now his pimple's a dimple. There was an old man from Crewe who wanted to know how to moo. He studied a cow to try and learn how, but all he could do was boo. The news. Here is the news. 2 incredible shoes. 2 incredible shoes. That's the news. When it rains, they walk down drains. They glow in the snow. They grizzle in a drizzle. They sneeze in a breeze. They get warm in a storm. They go soggy when it's foggy. They've even hissed in a mist. But, sad to say, there came a terrible frost. This is what happened. They got lost. That was the news. 2 incredible shoes. 2 incredible shoes. That was the news. Bleep. Wait for the bleep, wait for the bleep. Bleeps on the phone. Bleep, bleep, bleep. Bleep on the freezer, bleep on the monitor, bleep on the crossing lights, bleep on the computer. Wait for the bleep, wait for the bleep. Bleeps on machines, bleeps in my sleep. Bleep, bleep, bleep. Get up. Get up, Joe. Get up, Eddie. The tea's in the teapot. The sausages are ready. Get up, Eddie. Get up, Joe. Eddie says yes. Joe says no. So, cover him up with cornflakes. Pour milk on his head. Put sugar in his ears and leave him in his bed. Polypropylene. I'm a mat on the floor, just by the door. I'm tough. I'm mean. I'm polypropylene. Prop, propylene. Propylene keeps it clean. Polypropylene. Bips. Look out, the bips are out. They leer, they sneer, they put on nasty grins. They fight, they bite, they lick their sweaty chins. They mutter, they splutter, they show their greasy fangs. They grunt, they hunt. They go about in gangs. They yell, they smell, they wave their little flags. And they keep dead sheep in dirty little bags. Look out, the bips are out. Look out, the bips are out. More, more, more. Supermarket shopping. I can't stop stopping. I can't walk by. I buy, buy, buy. Everything on the shelf I want for myself. Everything I see I want for me, me, me. I'm gonna load up a sack. You can't hold me back. I want more, more, more. More, more, more. More's not enough. Give me more stuff. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Munch, munch, munch. Tag along. Little Johnny Tagalong wants a pat on the head. He does as he's told and gets a kick instead. Who am I? My face fell off my head and landed on the floor, wriggled about a while, then galloped out the door. It scared a cat in the yard. It ate some bread and jam. It fell into a puddle. Now I don't know who I am. Yesterday. The day before yesterday, I think I'll go to school. I think I'll take a walk in the local swimming pool. The TV's broken, so I think I'll watch the news. I'll be going out barefoot in my sister's shoes. I don't like her, so I call her my friend. When I leave, I'll start at the end. By way of a postscript to the Book of Nonsense, I should say I wrote it when I was going through a bit of a low point in my life. I was going through a divorce and I was separated from my family and living in a flat up the Holloway Road in North London. And many of those poems relate to what was going on in the flat. Joe and Eddie were my teenage sons and they were living there. That's why I was getting them to try and get up. So in a way I identified with Edward Lear, who after all was extremely morose. And as an incredible coincidence, I found out at the time that Edward Lear was born in a house, not still standing, almost over the road from the flat where we were living. So, a few years later I sat down to write even more nonsense, and once again I was at a low point in my life. This time, even more terribly, I had just lost my dear son Eddie from meningitis. He had died just before he was 19. So here I was writing a book of nonsense poems that are supposed to make people laugh, when in fact I was feeling absolutely terrible. Here's something that smells. Something that smells we call a scent. Two things that smell we call scents. So something that doesn't smell we can call a non-scent. And two things that don't smell we can call non-scents. If you ask me, this sounds like nonsense. Walking home. Walking home in the night, walking home in the night, looking into houses, seeing all the lights. Lights in the windows, lights in the doors, lights up the stairs, lights on all the floors. But my house is odd. My house is strange. The moment I reach home, I can see that it's changed. There's water in the room where I go to sleep. Water, water everywhere. Water really deep. There's a man in the kitchen. I see him swimming past. There's a girl in the lounge. Oh, she's swimming fast. There are people upstairs splashing water at each other. There's a girl in the window splashing her little brother. And swimming round and round my bedroom wall is my Uncle Jack with his old beach ball. And isn't that my neighbour's daughter? Yeah, that's my neighbour's daughter. She's come round for a swim because my house is full of water. My house is not a house. I feel such a fool. I used to live here, but my house is now a pool. Plonky wonky doodah. Plonky wonky doodah, chatting online. Plonky wonky doodah, chatting all the time. Plonky wonky doodah, computer nerd. Plonky wonky doodah, don't be so rude. Plonky wonky doodah, it's time for your food. Plonky wonky doodah hasn't even heard. My friend Elsie. My friend Elsie got very hot. My friend Elsie got a big spot. My friend Elsie started to drink. My friend Elsie started to stink. My friend Elsie went all red. My friend Elsie went to bed. My friend Elsie had to stay in. My friend Elsie got very thin. My friend Elsie in the midnight hour. My friend Elsie turned into a flower. My friend Elsie smells so sweet. My friend Elsie has lost her feet. My friend Elsie has lost her boots. My friend Elsie has grown deep roots. the great big hole. Look at the road! Look at the road! Right in the middle is a great big hole. What shall we do? What shall we do when we get close to the great big hole? I walk round, right round the edge of the great big hole. But you fall in, you disappear in the great big hole. Now there's me, just me on my own, and a great big hole. You think you know. You think you know who's who. You think it's me, but it's you. You think you know where we are. You think it's near, but it's far. You think you know when it is. You think it's mine, but it's his. You think you know why I don't. You think I will, but I won't. You think you know what's what. You think I'm here, but I'm not. When my son Eddie was a little boy, he couldn't say the word machine. He would say the word smeenge, but we didn't know that he was referring to a machine. So this is the background to this poem. The smeenge. The smeenge. What is the smeenge? The parents ask the child. It's big, it's small, it's round, it's square, it's kind of sort of wild. The smeenge. What is the smeenge? The parents want to know. It's loud, it's quiet, it sits, it runs, it's kind of sort of slow. The smeenge. What is the smeenge? The parents want an answer. It jumps, it leaps, it growls, it purrs, it's a kind of sort of dancer. The smeenge. Where is the smeenge? The parents are in despair. It's up, it's down, it's there, it's here, it's kind of sort of everywhere. The smeenge. What is the smeenge? The parents don't know what. It's a thing, I think. I've kind of, sort of forgot. Riding down to Boxland. Riding down to Boxland, where people live in boxes. Riding down to Boxland, the people live in boxes. No chickens there, been eaten by the foxes. Riding down to Boxland, saw a box looking good. Riding down to Boxland, found a box looking good. Wanted to knock on the box, wondered if I should. Riding down to Boxland, I knocked on the lid. Riding down to Boxland, knock, knock on the lid. Though I knocked loud, you'd never know I did. Riding down to Boxland, no answer from inside. Riding down to Boxland, not a sound from inside. I picked up the box to take it for a ride. Riding back from Boxland, the box coming with me. Riding back from Boxland, the box coming with me. Laid it out at home for everyone to see. When I got back from Boxland, everyone was there. I was back from Boxland, everyone was there. No one looked inside. There's no one who dared. Inky Stinky. Inky Stinky Skullface doesn't like his dad. Inky Stinky Skullface thinks his dad is bad. Hobbly Bobbly Pimple Chops looks like Stinky's dad. So Inky Stinky Skullface thinks Hobbly Bobbly's bad. My drink. My drink started to stink. My dumpling was crumpling. Dinner, disaster, my head was spinning faster and faster, my bread was turning red, my peas began to sneeze, faster and faster, faster and faster, we were heading for dinner disaster. My eggs were growing legs, my beans were wearing jeans, my pie winked its eye, my rice was chasing mice. At 5:30, my dinner was alive. At 8:30, so was my plate. At the end of the day, my dinner ran away. No more dinner, no more dinner. This happens every day, and I'm getting thinner. Thinner and thinner, thinner and thinner. My dinner runs away almost every day. Windscreen wipers. My windscreen wipers don't want to wipe. They're old and tired and need a rest. They've swished and swashed for years and years. They think they've done their best. So I took them off and brought them home and gave them each a chair. They sit and watch old movies, or simply sit and stare. They do the snake who cleaned windows, the windscreen vipers joke. They talk of scrapes and dangers, like the time the windscreen broke. They read the papers, have a stretch, and after they have fed, they have a wash, clean their teeth, and settle down in bed. My windscreen Still gets dirty and wet. It looks smarter than it's been. 2 new wipers, strong and fast, wipe the windscreen clean. Our party. Come to our party. It's going to be a crazy thing. You won't have to dance. You won't have to sing. Come to our party. Please don't make a mess. Come how you like. No need for fancy dress. Come to our party. Don't bring beers. Please bring your sobs. Please bring your tears. Come to our party. Come for a shout. Come for an hour. Cry your eyes out. Come to our party. You'll cry and cry. We've got plenty of water, so you won't get dry. Come to our party. Come for the night, 'cause it's time to cry with all your might. This final poem is about Eddie's shorts. Eddie was huge. He was 6'4", so he had very large shorts. So this is a tribute to Eddie's shorts. Treasure. I knew a woman who looked for treasure. She said she did it just for pleasure. To me that sounded a little bit funny. I'm sure she was after a load of money. One day she was digging an old football pitch. An odd place to dig if you want to get rich. Better to dig in castles and forts. But a few feet down, she found some shorts. She realised, as the shorts were uncovered, something special had been discovered. No question about it, this was a stunning find. They were giant shorts for a giant behind. Straight away the shorts were shown on TV. All over the world, crowds gathered to see these incredible shorts from underground, the biggest shorts that had ever been found. The experts appeared to talk us through. Someone wore these shorts, we can't say who. They may have been rich, maybe poor. A footballer perhaps, or a dinosaur. Soon there were pictures of the shorts being worn, explanations of why they were torn, giant footballers scoring brilliant goals, cartoons with arrows pointing to the holes. Everyone thinks they've got the answer, or nearly, but no one knows anything about them really. People keep pretending they are seriously wise about underground shorts of an incredible size. And I know this sounds a little bit soppy, but a museum in Florida made a copy. To show that the shorts were really wide, they say a whole school climbed inside. The woman, I'm afraid, never got rich. The government closed the football pitch. There's a book called Shorts in Ancient History, but to tell the truth, it's all a mystery. I want to read now from a book called In the Colonie, a memoir of separation and belonging. It's the third in a trilogy of memoirs, each one meant to be a memoir in itself, starting from when I was very young up until the present day. The central core of the poems all take place in a colonie de vacances in France, which was a kind of youth camp for kids from a factory. But that should be explained in the poems. I say poems, really they're prose poems, or in French as one would say, poème en prose, slightly after Baudelaire, or if you prefer, they're paragraphs. None of them have titles. My mother told me that at the end of my first week at nursery school when I was 3, she went in to have a chat with the teacher. "How's things going with him?" my mother asked. "Everything's fine," said the teacher, "but do you want to leave him out of religious things?" "Why's that?" said my mother. "Well," said the teacher, "before we eat, we all stand up, put our hands together and close our eyes, and we say, 'Thank you, God, for the food we eat.' But Michael won't stand up. He stays sitting in his chair, shouting, 'No thank you, God. No thank you, God.'" It was their front rooms. No one was ever in their front rooms. The curtains in the windows were open, but it was always dark behind. The houses looked out onto the streets with their eyes shut. I knew there were people inside, but they stayed in the back. Sometimes I met them. They were my friends' parents, and they told us not to go into the front room. I asked my friends why not, and all they could say was that it was what they were told. I understood that their parents thought other people shouldn't see you as you sat down to listen to the wireless. Watching television cowboys was how they learnt to gallop. Pew, pew! That was the gun, and they smacked their bums, the horse's back. We had the wireless. And now for our cereal, the Eagle of the Ninth. It was the end of the empire. Hundreds of Roman soldiers had headed north and disappeared. I ran home to go looking for them. At school, we mapped the Queen's visit to Australia all along the classroom wall. Can you bring in pictures? No, there aren't any pictures of the Queen in the Daily Worker. And soldiers, please. She wanted soldiers. There was trouble in Kenya, but there was good news. Locking them up seemed to be working, she said. Hopalong Cassidy, Cisco Kid, pew pew, who are you? My father once tried to explain to me what was wrong with their houses. Mock Tudor, he said. Phony baroni, look at it. Each one trying to look like something that it isn't. If there was somewhere else better, more real, more true to itself, he never told us where it was. All the while he carried out guerrilla attacks. He started with a builder's dump, which lay heaped up in a yard out the back of our flat. Every Sunday he raided it for old sinks, lengths of tubing, plugs, lampshades, taps, stuff that had been ripped out of the houses he hated. If he saw something out of reach, he would send me clambering up the pile to pull out a lavatory chain or a ballcock. It seemed to make him happy, claiming this stuff. But what made him really joyful was when we went raiding empty houses. He seemed to know where and when people moved out. Around the fringes of where we lived, there were big old houses, often set in long, wide gardens, places that had become run down and the people had gone or died. We would head out on a Sunday morning to find them. Sometimes he'd send me in to see if there was anything inside. Sometimes he'd come in too and we'd scurry about, looking for things. I remember old armchairs, mirrors, wardrobes, brown carpets, places where you could look out of the windows and see a lawn and hedges. We took a torch, and one time I went up into the loft. Something caught his eye. It didn't look much. He sent me crawling across to fetch it. It was some kind of jug or vase. He wiped the coat of dust off it, and you could see a dark green glaze. It was a big pot with two handles, rippled, as if it had been made out of coils. "Grab that," he said. My brother and I were put on a train out of Weimar, and we headed off into the Thuringienwald, a forest somewhere near Czechoslovakia, I was told. My brother was to stay in one house, and I would stay in another. It's all right, they said. There's someone in the family who speaks English. My family seemed to be some kind of farmers. Well, they had chickens in their garden, and I was put to play with two children, a boy and a girl, who were a bit younger than me and who kept saying, "Kick me," and running away. The one who spoke English was a big girl, who I thought was as beautiful as a film star, tall, with long blonde hair and a skin so white that it was almost grey. She seemed downcast or lost. Surely my big brother would go crazy about her. But he seemed more interested in the one in his house, who opened her mouth and laughed. I went to bed in an alcove, in a bed that had a high wooden side. One night the big blonde girl came and sat by my bed and asked me about my brother, and then sat next to me saying nothing, looking at me as I had looked at a bird that once flew into our front room at home, something that belonged elsewhere, now up closer than ever before. She said that she hoped that I was happy. I said I was. I didn't know why she stared at me in my wooden bed in the alcove, and I didn't say that I had no idea where I was or who she and her family were. One day we climbed to the top of a mountain that they were proud of, and my brother walked along the forest path ahead of me, strolling between the beautiful girls talking in German, while the children with me ran about under the pine trees, calling out, "Kick me! Kick me!" Afterwards my brother explained to me that he wouldn't be able to see them again, not ever. He wouldn't be allowed to come, and they wouldn't be allowed out of East Germany. Good things were a long way off. It always needed a bus and a train. Like for those New Year's do's where I was allowed to stay up and listen to Malcolm the actor and Solly the communist councillor's jokes. What was so funny about Jaime getting lost in the Alps, and when the Red Cross man came, him saying, "I've given already"? It was a bus, a train, and another bus to the place behind the cinema where they were building a theatre. All they had was an old tin chapel and a new hall they called the Stanislavski Room. In the chapel I sat on my own, watching a play about a landlady and a man tearing paper. Then someone went crazy and grabbed him. A Jewish bloke got nasty. On Friday nights we would practice Stanislavski in the Stanislavski room. Mime peeling an apple, to show us how it isn't a potato. I had to grab a girl's hand and say that I loved her more than the moon. It was down to me to say that because there weren't any other boys. It wasn't supposed to matter that I was 12 and they were 15 and 16 and 17 and tried to be kind to me. Your eyes are like the stars. Marry me in the Stanislavski room. Then out, past the tin chapel, back on the bus, back on the train, back on the bus, the house's eyes shut. I ran away from home. I said, I'm going on the Aldermaston March to ban the bomb. They said that this was out of the question. The boy's mad, crazy. My mother said, where will you stay? You'd have nothing to eat. You don't know anyone. What would you eat? You're not going. Harold, say something. He's too young. Look at him. He's packing. You can't go without a spare pair of trousers. How can he carry a bag like that for 20 miles a day? Stop him, Harold. What would you do in the evening? You need to eat. You get ill if you don't eat. Take a tin of beans. You can always eat beans. Harold, stop him. There's the chicken. Take the chicken. If you're taking a tin of beans, take 2. He's 13, Harold. Go next year. Wait till next year. They won't have banned the bomb by then, believe me. There'll be another march. Go on that one. You must keep eating fresh fruit. And you like dates. He's always liked dates, hasn't he, Harold? Just squeeze them in down the side of the bag. Couldn't he wait till the last day when we'll be there? We can all go to Trafalgar Square together. Harold, have you got the chicken? Just because it's Easter doesn't mean it's warm. It can snow at Easter. Wear the string vest. Who's organised the coaches? Do we know these people, Harold? 1 orange. Take 5. And raisins. He's 13. It's ridiculous. He can't go. Keep the chicken wrapped. Phone us if you need more food. Goodbye. The poems that follow start with a slow slide into my stay in the Colonie de Vacances when I was 16. I'm now doing what my parents did with me, bringing up a child just a few years after a son had died. I didn't know that I was one who came after until I was 10, going through photos and asking who was that baby on my mother's knee. My father saying it was the baby who died. My mother never mentioning it, never saying it, no conversation with her about it ever. It took our child coming along, 54 years after I was born, for me to realise that my parents were people who thought about how they had lost a child. It had never crossed my mind before then. So from the age of 10 I knew that there had been a brother before me, and yet I never looked at my mother or father and thought that the things they said or did might have been that way because of what had happened to their baby. When I was 16, I went away to France for 6 weeks. My father was going to take me to the station. My mother was leaving for work. She was going to leave the house before me. I said goodbye to her. She didn't go. She went upstairs to fetch something and came down again. My father waved his hand at me. What? I said. Your mother. Go to her. She's upset. I've been away before, haven't I said. But really, I was thinking of my brother. He had been away this long several times, and there hadn't been any big scene when he went. But now, from where I'm standing today, I can see that he was different. He was older than the one who died. He came before. I came after. I went to her, but she said not to fuss, and she went off to work. Not to fuss. And now this little one. Look what she did today. She put her hand in the plant pot, filled her hand with gravel, and threw it on the kitchen floor. Don't do that, you said. And she did it again, and again. So I took her up the garden and she said, I throw stonies, and laughed. What happens now? Do we try to make sure she knows that we don't want this to happen? I'm about to go to the Turkish supermarket to buy some hummus. Do we go through some routine where we say she can come if she stops throwing stones? Or will it all seem like life's too short? Yes, just that, too bloody short. Well, my love, you shut the back door. How unlike you. While we stayed out in the garden, and our little one was unhappy because she wanted to come in, and I said that you were cross. There were all the stones to clear up. And she said sorry, and we did go to the Turkish supermarket, and we bought hummus. And when we got back, my love, you and me, we sat outside in the evening sun and drank cold Turkish beer. Efes. How he loved Efes. How we're loving this Efes. I thought it was the journey there that was worrying her. I was the only 16-year-old she had heard of who would have to get themselves from London to the Ardèche by themselves. I was the only one I knew too. My father thought he'd make it safe, for me, for him, by running through the details. Dover, Calais, Gare du Nord, métro to Gare de Lyon, Valence, Aubenas, and there you'll be met by Madame Guerci. They're that easy, like holding your breath till you get there. Like holding my breath in the gourde, the pool in the river where I'd met them all last year. Would the same ones be there again this year? Ben Zizi, the brown-skinned midget, Godmar, the Elvis, Maurice, the communist moniteur, Alice, the Moroccan, Mercedes, the Spanish nun. Not really, she was 15, but looked like that. And the heat. It would be hot like that again, wouldn't it? French money, English money, traveller's checks. All to go in the maroon Moroccan leather wallet. What's he going to wear, Harold? He's got his anorak. It's too small. It doesn't fit, he can't wear that. All right, he can have mine. His? The East German anorak? Bought 5 years earlier in Weimar? Or was it in East Berlin where I discovered Bratwurst mit Senf? I'd always loved that anorak, with its soft tartan lining, faded blue. I loved that faded blue. And you can put the wallet in the front pocket, then you'll know where it is, like Kessner's Emil Tischbein off on the train to Berlin. But my money, not like his, pinned to the inside of his pocket where the thief got it. Mine, in the wallet, in the German communist anorak. Paris was hot. The Gare de Lyon was hot. Look at me, sitting in a cafe in Paris on my own, drinking jus de pomme. Out of all the people from school, I'm the only person I know who's ever drunk jus de pomme. And I've gone in there and said, un jus de pomme, s'il vous plaît. And here I am, drinking it. At 3 minutes before midnight, the train groaned out. I stood looking out at the waves of apartments, and I thought of the thousands, and hundreds of thousands, and millions of petits pois au lardon sitting in the cupboards of the buildings. I thought of how school had ended with a coach trip and sad snogging, and I realised I had left the anorak hanging from a door handle in the cafe. I once arranged for a German boy to come and stay so that my boy could speak some German for his GCSE. He was a bewildered creature who blurted out facts about America and reasons why boys shouldn't clear up. He wanted to play with baby toys. When I told him, because he asked me about why I had a German name, that I was Jewish, he said that that wasn't possible. I asked him about his name. His parents were Hungarian, he said. I said I didn't think that that was impossible. When he was leaving, we sat in the departure lounge at Heathrow. We didn't look at each other. I saw a man, an actor, who wrote a book about being a father or divorce or both, and he was there with his son, the one he had written about. And he was arguing with him about what was in his bag or what wasn't in his bag, and then he said goodbye and tried to hug the boy, but the boy was ratty and just turned away. Then I said goodbye to the German boy, and it was so cold, and he was so far off, and looked so keen to get away from me. I felt bad that I'd got it wrong, and I remembered Madame Guerci meeting me on Aubenas station. Tiny Madame Guerci, never out of her black swimsuit, always tucking in the edges of her bum, her side teeth silvered, always on show with her laughing and laughing. It's going to be a good colony this year, she said, and reached up to hug me and kiss me and hug me again. Comme t'es grand, Mike, you're so big. 1.80 meters. Everyone's here. This year you can't drive to the place or walk there. You have to go over the river. You have to pull on the wires. She took her hands off the steering wheel and pulled on imaginary wires. I slid about on the metal floor in the back of her 2CV van, bouncing up into the mountains. "Oh, it's marvellous you've come. You remember Alain, Maurice?" I said I did, but there were always people called Alain and Maurice. Next to her on the front seat was Jules. Dark Jules. Dark skin, black hair, long stiff neck. Wasn't he the kid no one liked, and there was a fight last year when someone said that his bed smelt of wee? At least, that's what I thought they said. Pissenlit. It does mean dandelion, though. The year before, my father had said that as I'd got on with them all so well, swimming at the Gourde, would I like to stop goofing around with him and Mum and stay with these colony kids for the last 5 days of the holiday. He just went up to the Moniteur and said, "How about it?" And a few days later, I was in a tent making lavender bottles with them all, bending lavender flowers down into the stalks and weaving ribbon in and out till they were tight, like, as they said, bottles. The Ardèche was hot and dry like a desert. The thyme went brown. There was lavender under our fingernails. Make more lavender bottles? Who does he think we are? Slaves? That was Benzizi. No one spoke English. I had to become French all day, and we did Don Quixote. Maurice, the communist moniteur, shouted at them to learn their lines, make props. Sunburned Etienne, wearing a colander and wielding a broom, was Don Quixote. Little Benzizi was Sancho Panza with my striped towel over his shoulder. Mercedes was the beautiful woman. Alice was the narrator. There wasn't time to put me in the play, Maurice said. On the day before the show, he stopped everything and said that he was disgusted by them all. They were a generation of don't-carers. None of them thought about the future, only the present. All their ideas came from bad films and bad music. Your parents are all workers and trade unionists. They work their hearts out day after day in the Gerland chemical factory. They support the union, and it's the union that sorted it out for all of you to come to a place like this so that you don't spend the whole summer hanging around with yobs. But you say you don't care. I'm depressed, he said. I worry about what's going to happen to you. I worry about what's going to happen to France. In the tent afterwards, Benzizi said that he was going to organise a strike. Was I with them or against them? I thought, how can you organise a strike against a communist? I looked up the word for a guest. It said it was the same word for a host. I said, I am a guest, or host, and I didn't know if I could go on strike. Merde, said Etienne. So I said that I wasn't against the strike. Moi je suis communiste, said Benzizi. Moi aussi, I said. Me too. Madame Gertrude came down and sat on the floor and said that it was sad, sad, sad. Soon everyone would be back in Lyon, back at school, the colony would be finished. Let's not have a sad end. Maurice cares about you. He wants you to have everything in life, not to be satisfied with what you've been given. We're not slaves, said Benzizi. I agree, said Madame Gertrude. We played Don Quixote, lit by a bulkhead light off the side of the shower block. Don Quixote and Sancho Panza tilted at cardboard boxes. The little ones giggled and screamed. My dad had tears in his eyes. Perfect, perfect, he said. Pure Brecht, pure Brecht. That Maurice. What a man. What a man. Pull on the wires. This year we would reach the colony on a chariot. Everything and everybody would get to the tents, the shower and the cooking blocks on a chariot over the river. There was no other way. The 2CV could go no further. You stand on the platform and pull one wire while over your head the chariot's wheels ran round, locked under the other wire. Vas-y, Mike, Dark Jules said. Off you go. And Madame Gertrude laughed till the silver showed. Maman, maman! There was a baby on the other side of the river. See, it's Mike, she called back to the baby. You've had a baby, I said. That was quick. Normal, she said. No faster than usual. So I climbed up. Madame Gertrude and Jules watched from one side, the baby and Madame Gertrude's sister from the other. In the middle, it lurched and invited me into the water. And I'm smelling all over of London, though this year I've got flip-flops and boxers. What's the big deal with these rubber slipper things you keep going on about? What's the matter with your sandals? My father had said. Yes, said my mother. Sandals are good. Everyone wears sandals. They don't, I said. No one wears bloody sandals. I've got to have flip-flops. I must have them. This year I couldn't have the kids asking me again why I wore strange things. I got to love the way the chariot was lurching. We would get up there in twos and threes, me, tiny Benzizi, Maurice the footballer, Pink Nicolas, and sit on the hot wood and dive or fall or bomb off it, feel the rush of the water over and over. We would sit with our legs dangling, looking between our knees. We would nudge and shove till we flailed about in the air and smacked the river. It was something we had to go on and on doing. You could pull the chariot fast and fall off the back. You could hang like a cowboy on a cliff edge. You could take off screaming or roll off dead. You could sit in the heat, pulling your sunburn off and dropping it into the water, and talk about the girls one by one, every single one of them. It was a place to be that was so far and so long away. I rehearsed a phone call home. All that money. And the anorak. I rang and I told them about how the journey was fine and Madame Gertrude was there to meet me, and this year we were in a place by the river. We're in a horseshoe. We're surrounded by cliffs. It looks like Lone Ranger country. You can only get to it by a chariot over the river, and I left the anorak at the Gare de Lyon with all the money in it. It was my father, and I could hear a look. It was the one he did when he looked across the room to my mother. And I could hear her look back. And the lips, if things weren't going well, they were both very good at lip work. It was soundless tutting. "You're not to worry," he said. "If it's lost, and we'll claim it off the insurance. You make sure you have a good time, and write. Tell us how it is." Madame Gertrude said that she rang the Gare de Lyon, but nothing. Benzizi was older and louder than me, but he had stopped growing sometime when he was about 10. His skin was so brown that if he got in a fight, the scratch marks were white. The only people I'd ever seen who looked like him were Brazilian footballers. He had learnt to collect guardians, Maurice, the footballer, who also looked Brazilian, and Godmar, the Elvis, who had two sayings. "Qu'est-ce que c'est ce boulot?" which I sensed meant something like, "What's the point of this work?" and "Ça va la foule? How you doing, you lot?" Maurice did keepy-uppies while he sang, "Allez l'OL, allez l'OL, allez." Godmar combed his hair and straightened his jeans down his legs, and word went round that he was seriously bad back home in Lyon. He had done things. No one would say what. Benzizi was in love with Françoise, he said. He said she was the most beautiful woman he had ever known. I thought so too, but I said nothing. But then I'd thought Alice and Mercedes were. They weren't here this year. And this year the girls wore a bikini that was like a swimsuit that had the middle cut out of it. All of them, apart from Nicole, who wore what looked like 3 tiny blue hankies. They poured Nivea on their arms, and it was beyond belief to think that as they sat on the stones by the river, their nakednesses were only seconds away. I'd never been so close for so long to so many girls wearing so little, and they all seemed so completely, so totally, so calmly uninterested in any of us. They seemed to love each other, smoothing in the Nivea, washing and brushing each other's hair, painting each other's nails, moving each other's bikinis and T-shirts into the right place, swapping jeans, telling each other what they looked like from behind, going off to the shower room, locking the door, and laughing in there for hours. This year our moniteur was Henri, who said he didn't believe. He had his beliefs, but it was a long story. For the whole 6 weeks he wore the same pair of leopard skin nylon boxers. He looked like a Brazilian footballer too. As he lay on the bed next to mine in our tent at siesta time, I looked at his hair. It was frizzy and crinkly, like a black lamb's. Alain, the trainee electrician, rigged up a record player outside between the fig trees. Benzizi played Les Platters, 4 black men who sang 16 Tons, and Ray Charles who sang Georgia, Georgia and Let Me Hear You Say Yeah. Benzizi could do a Ray Charles yeah perfectly, and he said that I ought to be able to too. But he left me alone while he jived with Françoise, who stood a foot taller than him. Henri interrupted Ray Charles with a jazz cabaret big band singer called Léo Ferré, who sang about a beautiful girl who he called Jolie Môme, beautiful Paris, which he called Paname, and a hard labour camp on the Île de Ré, where the men sang Merde à Vauban, shit to Vauban, who Henri explained was a famous 19th century civil engineer. Benzizi rocked his head back, hung out his little hands in an Elvis way and sang, Yeah! They kept saying, Je m'en fous. I didn't know what it meant. They said it meant, C'est fait rien, je m'en fiche, it doesn't matter, I don't care. I tried to imagine it on the page. Je m'en fous, perhaps. Is it then, tu m'en fous, il m'en fout? I said, how does it conjugate? I was asking Benzizi and Godmar, who, I hadn't clocked, weren't that bothered with school and, like their fathers, would soon be working in the Gerland chemical factory. They were helpless, slapping each other laughing. They were trying to explain that it meant I don't give a fuck, or literally, I fuck myself about it. So it had to be tu t'en fous. You fuck yourself about it, not tu m'en fous, which would mean you fuck me about it. They cried and laughed, stopped, and then cried all over again. Our tent stood on an old vine terrace where vines still grew, and Maurice the footballer raided them, grabbing the bunches, holding them above his mouth and running his lips over the grapes as a camel would, pulling them into his mouth. He laughed at me, trying to eat them one by one, spitting the pips out. Just scoff them! Bouffe! Bouffe! He shouted. Our tent smelt of armpits, grit, hot canvas and old comic books. Nothing covered the ground apart from old duckboards, caillebotis, so our beds worked their way into the earth. When we lay on our backs on our beds in the afternoons, we'd watch the sweat swell out of our chests, the beasts run over the roof, the plastic bucket green praying mantis stalking the flying grasshopper, with a spike sticking out of her rear, horseflies as big as your thumb planning their next plunge into your arm, and ants climbing the legs of the beds. What were they all for, these things? Someone left a cigarette end in the rubbish basket while we were hanging round the river, and it was dark Jules, who it turned out did piss in his bed, who spotted the smoke while he was coming away from the shower block. As he ran towards the tent, it burst into flames, and he was yelling and yelling. He got there first and ran into the tent and grabbed our stuff and threw it out into the vines, went in and grabbed some more, threw that, and so by the time we got there he was crying and choking, but he had saved a load of our stuff. Soon, Henri the moniteur had a chain set up and we were hurling water at it, and I was thinking about the praying mantis, la menthe religieuse, burned at the stake, and hours later, sitting under the fig tree, Pink Nicolas said that dark Jules' sheet hadn't burned, and the girls told Pink Nicolas that he was a shit and smacked him hard. Madame Gertsch's husband turned up and said that the boys from the union at Berlier would be joining us. Berlier, the truck factory. That was why Lucien Leblanc turned up, along with two tall white boys, Bernard et Bertrand. Lucien was white too, but that was because he was nearly albino. White, wavy hair that he was always patting, and white hairs on his legs. He said that he had won the Marseille under-17 200 metres. He wore running shorts, and once when we camped out by the side of the river, he danced in front of everybody, singing Little Richard's Balam Bam Boola Tutti Frutti, as if it was French. He liked the way his legs moved. When we were up on the plateau in the heavy heat, he got thirsty, but I had brought my dad's US Army water bottle. "Let me have a drink," he said. "Hang on," I said. "You shit," he said. "Call yourself a communist and you can't share your water?" And he rammed the metal spout into my teeth. Bernard et Bertrand said that they were the kind of guys who liked to do things, and Benzizi looked round at everyone. Bernard et Bertrand would have to learn that when it came to doing things, they should talk to Benzizi first. They organised the building of a ford. Every day we lifted rocks and boulders and laid them in the river. I had never sweated like it. Monsieur Gertschy came and stood on the bank and saw my back looking up at the sun. "Jolie écrevisse," he called out. "Pretty lobster." We moved hundreds of stones. Henri loved it. He called us bagnards, hard labour convicts, and sang Merde à Vauban at us. Godmar said, "Qu'est-ce que c'est ce boulot?" One day, after moving more boulders, we sat down to eat, and I think Henri said something about how maybe even if we finished the ford, we probably wouldn't be able to get cars over it, and Bernard exploded. He shouted about how it had been his idea, and that we hadn't helped him, and Henri had never taken it seriously, and we could all go fuck ourselves, and he was fucked if he was going to eat the rest of his dinner. Bertrand, who was the only French boy in shorts I'd ever seen with socks on, put his arm round him, but Bernard shrugged it off. I said if he wasn't eating his ice cream, I would have it, and I pulled his plate over and sat eating his ice cream. Benzizi and Godemar and Pink Nicolas and Maurice the footballer and Alain the trainee electrician looked at me. I went on eating the ice cream. Benzizi said, "We don't do that sort of thing, Mike." It was Bernard who tried to lead the lentil strike. He said that he didn't want to eat peasants' food. Every Thursday we had lentils. We didn't cook our own food. 2 women from the village came in and they brought Michel, a son of one of them. He looked as if his body was held together by wires. Under the skin, all over him, you could see the wires pulling on his bones. He took 2 of us down to the cellars and showed us how we could steal the Moniteur's wine. He opened a bottle and gave it to us. I said that I didn't believe it was wine. He was just trying to trick me. "It's vinegar," I said. He loved that. "Mike says it's vinegar. Look," he said. "Watch me." And he lifted the bottle in its straw casing up to his mouth and gulped it down. "Now you have some." Alain, the trainee electrician, and Benzizi joined in. "No," I said, "I think it's vinegar." "Would I drink vinegar?" he said. "Perhaps," I said, "if you wanted to trick me." He loved that too. He took us to see the man the boys called the peasant, and this old man gave us pastis, with a thick aniseed smell, green Pernod, that he made himself. Bernard wanted that. He drank it like it was milk, and he went red and stupid in a moment. The peasant sat on his terrace underneath his fig tree, drinking it every evening, nodding to us as we mooched past him down below. Michel often ate with us, and he loved the lentils. I asked them once if Michel was a peasant, and they said yes, but he was a good bloke, and brave type. Even so, Bernard wouldn't eat lentils, and tried to get us all to join the lentil strike. Some agreed, especially Nicole in her 3 blue hankies. She said that their parents didn't think their trade union was sending them away to have lentils every Thursday. I said I liked lentils. I loved their rough brown taste and their thick sauce, with bits of old burnt bacon, was it, floating around? They asked me if I ate lentils in England, and I said I'd never seen them before. "There you are," they said to Henri the Moniteur. "They don't eat them in England." But they could hear me and Michel sucking them in off our spoons. Henri said that tonight we were going to go up on the plateau and walk all night. We crossed the river in the dark, but there was enough light from the stars for us to see ourselves in the river. Up on the plateau we saw glowworms and toads. We alerted dogs and got lost. "We'll make a fire," said Henri. So we made a fire and we cooked petits pois au lardon. He stamped on the flames to turn the wood to embers and threw strips of meat on them. We sat under a bluey-white roadside light eating. Nicole and Giselle said that we would never get back to the camp, and everyone asked Henri if he knew where we were. "No," he said, "so let's go." A few 100 yards down the road he stopped. He got out his torch and shone it on a stone by the side of the road. There was a list of names. Henri said that there had been a village here, and during the war the Nazis had killed all the men of the village. "Bastards," said Benzizi. "Dégueulasse," said Alain, the trainee electrician. We stood in the road, above us a huge sky, the 1 or 2 trees watching us. Henri at one end of a beam of light, and the men's names on the other. I tried asking Henri what had happened, but he couldn't speak, and Benzizi put his hand on my arm to shut me up. I needed them more than they needed me. They knew each other, their mothers and fathers worked together, they shared the same schools and streets and shops. They talked about meeting in the market. I wanted to be them, but I was irritated that I wasn't them. There didn't seem to be anything they wanted from me, or anyone English that they wanted to know about, or any English words that they wanted to hear. They didn't need to know about houses with their eyes shut, or why it got up my nose that the deputy head had told me that her idea of the ideal grammar school pupil was one who conforms, and why the ones who didn't discovered Charlie Parker. My currency was valueless. The joke about Jaime and the Red Cross didn't translate. My imitation of our biology teacher or Danger Man from weekend TV didn't work. No one needed to care about even the tiniest fragment of cricket or Arsenal. There was a time when someone asked me something about Prince Charles, but I said that I was a Republican, which set up a running gag. Every other day, someone sitting near me would sing "God Save the Queen" and leap to their feet. I said that I thought Brigitte Bardot was incroyable, because the previous year I had seen her projected onto a wall in the village square down the road from here. Babies crying, children playing football, when in the midst of the kerfuffle up there on the wall for all to see, framed by the cafe owner's washing, BB took all her clothes off and lay down on her back on a beach. And the old ladies in black, their husbands long dead from the war, the old men who had just finished their game of boule right where we were sitting, the young women who were making plans for the fete next week, the young men who knew that one day soon they would have to leave this place for work in Clermont or Lyon, all of them, the whole village, clapped to see Bardot show herself to them, right there on their wall. "You know," I said, "they cut that bit out when they showed it in England." "That's you Anglo-Saxons again," said Henri the Moniteur. And I thought, what have the Anglo-Saxons got to do with it? What's he on about? And anyway, merde, je suis pas Anglo-Saxon, moi, hein? Shit, I'm not Anglo-Saxon, me. Okay? In the wood across the river, the rocks turned into a cliff. In amongst these was a cave, the Grotte du Soldat, they called it, because during the war, which after all had ended only 17 years earlier, a man from the resistance had hidden in it. We went in with torches, the cool smacking our faces, the heat hugging us when we came out. I often did the trip inside with Pink Nicolas. Like me, he seemed to want the blackness beyond the pool of torchlight. There was a cliff about twice our height that we had to climb up. At the top, we had to lie down and squeeze under a rock to get into the next chamber, and there was a moment when you weren't holding on to anything. The rock seemed to weigh down on your chest in the dark, while you remembered but couldn't see the cliff below. Once, Pink Nicolas and me moved around the chamber for too long, and we couldn't find our way back to the cliff. In seconds, every metre in front of us was new, and the torchlight wasn't strong enough to light up the chamber. We thought that we'd find the cliff by moving to the right, thinking we were making a circle. We didn't, and it seemed like we were going further into the chamber where we had never been before. Pink Nicolas said that we should turn the torches out to see if we could see light. For a moment we stood in the cold blackness, listening to our breathing. Then we turned them back on and walked over the damp rocks some more, till we heard Benzizi shouting that it was time for lunch. "Putain! Where the fuck are you?" Pink Nicolas whispered to me quick, "Don't ever tell them that we were lost." 2 days later, me and Lucien Leblanc were standing in the river throwing stones when Françoise came running out of the woods. "Didi!" she screamed. Didi, with his thick, knotty legs, was Madame Gertsch's brother-in-law and a moniteur for the little ones. "He's fallen in the cave and he's not moving. He's lying in the cave, not moving. Il bouge pas." I knew where he must have fallen, down the cliff. Lucien didn't wait to wonder. He started running. He splashed out of the water and headed for the office and shower block. I was caught. Should I go to the cave or follow Lucien? The way to the office was rocky. What if he broke his ankle? I ran after him. By the time I got near the building, people were running back towards me with blankets, and medics had been called. Madame Gertsch's sister was sobbing with big, sad sobs. They found him, lying on his back, his skull cracked. There was a moment when we saw him as they loaded him onto the chariot over the river, his brown skin turned to khaki. I asked Françoise if it happened by the cliff, but she had no idea what I was talking about. "Why did you run after Lucien instead of going back to the cave?" There was a tree I found where a cicada laughed all summer and the fat red ants worked on me and my feet. It stood on its own by the side of the stone path running from the shower block to the river. There were times there, on my own too, that I let myself go back to the last day, the coach home from the day trip to Coventry, when we knew that this was the last time together. 5 years over, and now one of us was off, he said, to be a fridge mechanic, one a travel agent, another to art school, secretaries, hairdressers, and more study. As the bus pointed towards London and night came down, we were passengers on a boat that we couldn't stop, singing and drinking goodbye. So we reached for each other, touching and daring what had never been tried before. The boat stopped. We climbed out and went off, this way and that, in ones and twos, down the long roads of shut-eyed houses. Under the cicada, I wrote someone a letter, saying that I couldn't go on with all that, with any of that. The Scorpion Man arrived one afternoon when the heat was in our eyes. He wore brown English-style shorts, the first I'd seen for weeks, a used vest and something like a cowboy hat, sweat-stained round his hairline. His eyes were veiled with tinted glasses, and his skin was as dark as it's possible for someone I called white. I liked his ancient sandals. He said that he would look for scorpions, and right where we walked every day between the tents, round the bottom of the stairs leading to the office in the alleyway between the shower block and the peasant's house, he paced about, lifting stones. We followed after, until he said in a quiet voice, "Voilà!" We moved in, and watched him shunt something into a polythene wallet. Its tail lifted and wagged. "And there's the sack of poison," he said. It seemed so well made. A hook to stick in and catch your skin, with its ammo store of killer liquid tucked in just behind, ready to pour in, through the hole it had made in you. No worse than a wasp sting, this one, he said. We knew about that. One night in a barn that a farmer let us sleep in, Alain started shouting that a scorpion had got him. The torches went on, everyone laughing at Alain and his alarms. "Look," he said, and there was something like a pimple on his rib. "It's a pimple, Alain," we said. But a few seconds later he shouted, "Eh putain, what's this then?" And it was a scorpion, scrabbling about on the barn floor where we had all been sleeping. It just so happened that it was Alain it punctured first, Alain the trainee electrician who fitted the bulbs for the outdoor lights, Alain who would say to me at least 3 times a day, "Les Anglais avec le marché commun, dégueulasse." The English with the common market, disgusting. Which, as far as I knew, seemed likely. But whatever the truth, I loved saying it with him in chorus. I don't speak English. I don't even speak the French I was taught. Shoes aren't les chaussures here, they're les godasses. L'eau is la flotte, le vin is le pinard. My head is inside out. English used to be in deep and French outside. I've stopped translating. I don't think let's go and turn it into on y va. On y va is all I've got. And it's the same with j'en sais rien moi, n'y en a plus, and ça y est. I don't know what the English is doing. I think it's dying. The French is pushing it out of its seat in the middle where it thought it was safe. It thought it was in charge. And now it isn't. With 10 days to go before the end, Monsieur Guerchy came to us and said that we would go on a canoe trip for several days down the Ardèche from Pont d'Arc to the Rhône. I thought he meant kayaks, but a day later a truck arrived and we unloaded fat-bellied wooden canoes. One of us sat in the front pulling, while the one in the back had to both pull and control. He trained us on the horseshoe of our river, shouting "Appel! Écarte!", teaching the one in the back to do what I thought only Hiawatha knew, how to paddle a canoe on your own. Only boys could do this, he said, and Nicole spat into the river and said they could have done it. Merde! We fanned out onto the river at Pont d'Arc, and we're paddling, shouted Guerchy to us, under this, the biggest natural bridge in Europe, boys. I was with Bernard, and we were the last in the line of 10 red canoes pushing along on water that glittered in our faces. We called out to each other and our voices bounced down the gorge. At La Chaise, we tried to handle white water with our paddles buried in the foam. At night, we slept on thyme and sucked Mont Blanc condensed milk out of tubes that looked like they ought to be full of toothpaste. Coming round one cliff, 2 naked women kneeling up in a canoe skimmed towards us. "Keep your eyes on the river," shouted Gertrude and laughed into the air. And later we sat under the Cathédrale, a pinnacle of rock 300 or 400 feet above us, with 3 spires and an eagle prowling round. Bernard, giggling during his turn in the back, levered his paddle against a rock and snapped it. For the last 5 miles to the Rhone he had my paddle, and I lay in the belly of the canoe, taking the sun full on, like I thought a sahib. Lucien Leblanc cursed my luck. When we arrived back at the colony, the girls seemed to know that they should be there to meet us, and they told us how brown we were, and we showed them our blisters, and they went back to their Nivea and adjusting each other. They had become even more beautiful and unbearable. The way their arms reached forward and away from their bodies, making a space that we were never in. I was never sure whose idea it was to invade their tent. The plan was that we would come down off our vine terrace, cross the field and get down to the bamboo copse by the river which sheltered the girls' tent. It had to be secret, and the plan was whispered all day. We would go after le repas in the dark, when the moniteur sat in the office drinking wine as the mosquitoes and moths fried themselves on the purple killer light. They would think we were under the fig trees talking about les platters, but we would be flying across the field to the girls' tent. "Are you with us, Mike?" they said. I wasn't sure what I was with or what I was against. What were we going to do when we got there? What were we going to say that we didn't say when we were with them? Benzizi said that he was going to tell Françoise that she was a beautiful woman. Bernard said that he thought Nicole was the best, and dark Jules kept saying, "Giselle, Giselle," and shaking his head. We crept away from the fig trees, round to the vine terrace, and then across the field. At night it was clearer that the horseshoe of the river sat under a high circle of cliff. It was cowboy country. There were about 15 of us, hopping over the rocks and thistles, swearing as our toes scraped the stones, and then we got to the bamboo, their settlement, with their washing lines hung with their jeans and T-shirts. The light was on inside the tent, but it was quiet, not a sound. We looked at each other. What was the plan? That we would rush the tent? Then what? Benzizi pointed to the path through the bamboo, and we tiptoed along it, and just where it opened out into the space in front of the tent, we saw that Henri and Madame Gertrude were sitting, waiting for us. "Salut," said Henri. His face was lined with false smiles. "What a good evening for a hike. You should have told me that you fancied one more before the end of the colony. We could have gone up on the plateau again." Madame Gertrude said that it was sad, sad, sad. Soon everyone would be back in Lyon, back at school. The colony would be finished. Let's not have a sad end. In the coach back to Lyon, Nicole cried and cried and cried. Maurice sang, "Allez, Loël, allez, Loël, allez." Coming down off the mountains, Benzizi shouted that the coach was on fire. We looked down, and the wooden floor was burning. There were flames round the bottom of Pink Nicolas' seat. The coach driver stopped the coach and pushed his way towards us. He waved his hand and said it wasn't a big thing. Pas grand-chose. He stamped on the wooden floor, and the flames went out under his foot, and off we went. As we got into Lyon, they started cheering, and the coach pulled up under the walls of Gerland, the chemical works. Some of their parents were there. Not Godmar's, not Benzizi's, not Alain, the trainee electricians. They were men now. I shook everyone's hand. "Let's write," we said. Madame Gertrude said that she would take me to the station, the Gare de Lyon. "You call Lyon Station the Gare de Lyon?" I said. "Of course," she said. After a while I said, "And when you rang the Gare de Lyon about my anorak and the wallet, did you ring this Gare de Lyon or the Gare de Lyon in Paris?" "Oh, this one, of course," she said. At the station she hugged me and kissed me and said that it had been a good colony. And I nodded, and because I couldn't say it all, I couldn't say any of it. And then she was gone. My brother and father were waiting for me at Waterloo. "In the end, you wrote good letters," he said. "We started to get the picture. You're not as brown as I thought you'd be. Did it rain?" "No," I said, "it didn't rain once. For the whole 6 weeks we had sun." I got into the car. My brother sat in the front and I sat in the back. "Don't you want to know your exam results?" my father asked. He told me. I looked at London. "So what do you think?" he said. "Not bad," I said. "Not bad," he said. "Not 1A? Not even for English literature?" My brother was killing himself sitting in the front. He had been there before. The results inquest. How he loved it now that it was me in the dock. He sat there mouthing, "Not 1A," shaking his head, doing the sad disbelief thing, creasing his cheek like our father did, and then looking back at me and laughing and laughing. "Have you got a present for your mother?" my father said. "Have you got a present for your mother?" said my brother.